Our tale unfolds in the dead of night, with a man named Gabriel Drummer standing alone in the eerie silence of an abandoned house. With a heart full of courage, he ventures inside, rousing his son Jonathan from sleep. Together, they navigate the shadowy interior, their escape punctuated by the deafening sound of gunfire. As they descend the staircase, the harsh glare of a helicopter spotlight corners them outside the forsaken house. They retreat, seeking refuge within its broken-down walls. In a time that seems like a distant memory, we find Gabriel at Camp Lejeune, knocking on the door of Captain Peyton's office for a therapy session. As their conversation unfolds, Gabriel's gaze wanders around the room, landing on a framed photograph of Captain Peyton and his grandson. He inquires about the boy, but the conversation is swiftly redirected back to him. The session commences with an exploration of Gabriel's familial relationships and his bond with his friend, Devin Roberts. Gabriel delves into their shared experiences in the war-torn landscapes of Afghanistan. Fast forward to a later date, and we see Gabriel immersed in the rigorous training of a U.S. Marine officer. Alongside his comrades, he holds a piece of paper with a rigid grip, while Sergeant Miller's booming voice echoes discipline throughout the ranks. The sergeant zeroes in on Gabriel, striking his arms repeatedly for their lack of firmness. The officers are then dispatched to the next course. As dawn breaks, the grueling training continues. Gabriel and Devin strive to keep pace with their peers, enduring the harsh scolding of Sergeant Miller. Time shifts again, and we find Gabriel at home, his wife Natalie shaving his head. She reminds him of his paternal duties, to take Jonathan to school and address the issue of bullying with his teacher. The following day, Gabriel drives Jonathan to school. Their car ride is filled with cheerful chatter, peppered with military jargon. Jonathan inquires about the phrase, "man down," and Gabriel explains its significance. Upon reaching the school, Gabriel spots the bully tormenting Jonathan from a distance. Jonathan reveals the reason behind the bullying. It's because he is a mama's boy, and his mother's affectionate words have become a source of ridicule. Angered, Gabriel devises a secret code, "man down," as a substitute for "I love you," hoping to put an end to the bullying. Jonathan readily embraces the idea. The narrative then brings us back to the present, where Gabriel's city lies in ruins, devoid of life. His face, obscured by a thick beard and mustache, is barely recognizable. Suddenly, a radio crackles to life with Devin's voice, urging him to meet up after spotting a suspicious man. Gabriel springs into action. They find a homeless man named Charles and confront him. Gabriel grills Charles, desperate to understand what happened to his city and why he appears to be the sole survivor. Charles, bewildered, speaks of a friend and their struggle for survival. In a flashback to Camp Lejeune, Gabriel is subjected to an intense late-night training session. His eyes burn as Sergeant Miller sprays an irritant into them, adding an extra layer of difficulty to his task. Upon completion, Devin rinses his eyes with water, restoring his vision. Later, the U.S. Marine Corps and their families gather for a small event. Sergeant Miller delivers a brief speech, reminding them of their time at the camp and hinting at the journey that lies ahead. During an ongoing therapy session, Captain Peyton gently probes Gabriel about his relationship with Devin Roberts on the battlefield. Gabriel fondly recalls their friendship, describing Devin as a trusted battle buddy. However, when Captain Peyton delves into the events of the war in Kamdesh, Afghanistan, Gabriel clams up. In the present, Gabriel's desperation to find his family intensifies. He shows Charles a laminated photo of Natalie and Jonathan, but Charles fails to recognize them. Gabriel threatens him, refusing to believe his denial. In a flashback, Gabriel is assigned to a battle in Afghanistan. Natalie forcefully opposes his departure, leading to a heated argument. Despite this, Gabriel leaves, bidding a silent farewell to Jonathan. He promises to write letters every day and departs as Devin arrives to pick him up. Back in the present, Charles leads them to a shelter where he and his friends have been living. As they walk, Gabriel hears Charles mutter Jonathan's name. He confronts Charles, demanding to know how he knows his son. Charles denies saying anything, leaving Gabriel in frustrated silence, questioning his own hearing. In a flashback, Gabriel arrives in Afghanistan. Unable to reach Natalie, he contacts Devin, who is still in their city, and asks him to check on his family. Devin agrees without hesitation, informing Gabriel that he will be joining him in Afghanistan soon. Gabriel is taken aback by the news. During a therapy session, Gabriel grows frustrated as Captain Peyton continues to skirt around the events of the war in Kamdesh, Afghanistan. Reluctantly, Gabriel recounts the scene. He describes surveying his surroundings while his comrades were distracted. He spots a suspicious man mumbling in the distance and radios his captain, but a bomb detonates nearby before he can finish. The enemies open fire on the unprepared U.S. soldiers, resulting in numerous casualties. Gabriel and the others return fire. During the therapy session, Gabriel abruptly halts his story. The memory of entering a room during the attack terrifies him. His hand trembles as he recalls the traumatic event, and Captain Peyton prescribes calming pills in response. In the present, Gabriel and Charles sit in the shelter, engaged in conversation. Gabriel pleads with Charles to reveal the whereabouts of his son, but Charles angrily denies knowing Jonathan. Suddenly, Devin finds an envelope bearing Jonathan's name near Charles. Charles. In the ensuing argument, Devon accidentally shoots Charles as he tries to flee and deny the accusation. In a flurry of panic, Devon and Gabriel make a swift exit from the scene. Later, during the war, they stormed into the enemy stronghold with a sense of urgency. They meticulously scan the area as they ascend to the upper floor. Upon entering one of the rooms, they are met with a group of Afghan women, their pleas for mercy filling the air. Devon, agitated by their cries, trains his rifle on them. Meanwhile, Gabriel is tasked with inspecting the other rooms. He confidently declares the room free of enemies. His inspection of the bodies in the room is interrupted by a sudden movement under a blanket a few meters away. He yells, "Gun down!" as enemy fire rains down on them. Devon and one of their comrades are hit before they can find cover. Gabriel retaliates, firing continuously at the enemy's position. He quickly pulls back the blanket, revealing the lifeless bodies of an Afghan mother and child. He rushes to Devon's side, who apologizes to Gabriel with his dying breath. Gabriel urges him to fight. In a later therapy session, Gabriel is overcome with emotion as he recounts the horrifying event in the enemy's room. He admits his failure to identify the shooters as civilians and expresses deep regret for their deaths. After the war in Afghanistan, Gabriel becomes suspicious of a piece of paper on Devon's combat helmet bearing Natalie's Skype account. He retrieves the blood-stained paper after the attack and nervously logs into Devon's account on his computer. To his shock, he discovers that Devon and Natalie have been having a secret affair. At the same time, Natalie receives a call from Devon on her computer. She ends the call, guilt-ridden. When the call comes through again, she answers it, only to be met with Gabriel's distraught face. She pleads with him as she realizes he has discovered her betrayal. Gabriel vents his feelings of betrayal to Captain Peyton, expressing a desire to leave the office immediately. He becomes irate when Captain Peyton brings up the attack in Afghanistan while discussing his wife. The two engage in a heated argument, with Gabriel insisting that the captain cannot understand his pain. Captain Peyton asserts that he can help him. As the room falls silent, Captain Peyton eventually asks Gabriel if he has suicidal thoughts. He admits that he does, but the laminated photo of his family serves as a haunting reminder of his guilt. As the clock strikes 7, his therapy session concludes. Captain Peyton believes that Gabriel requires serious attention and medication, but Gabriel insists that he is beyond help and refuses any assistance. Captain Peyton reluctantly respects his decision, and Gabriel leaves. He is subsequently sent home due to his mental condition. Upon arriving in his city, he stands in front of his house, his gaze fixed on a distant bridge. Devon unexpectedly appears behind him and discusses Gabriel's thoughts of suicide on the bridge. They engage in a brief conversation, while Natalie and Jonathan watch them in silent confusion. In the final minutes of the film, the true events are revealed. Devon was killed in the shooting in Afghanistan, and his appearances in other scenes are merely figments of Gabriel's hallucinations. All this time, Gabriel has been interacting with Devon, who is invisible to everyone else. Meanwhile, Natalie desperately tries to regain Gabriel's trust. However, as time passes, Gabriel becomes increasingly distant from her. She is unable to understand her husband's condition, but eventually overcomes her fear of him. The devastated city that Gabriel has constructed in his mind does not exist. He ends up living on the streets, believing himself to be alone. He continues to terrorize his wife with regular threats as his mental issues worsen day by day. He disrupts the peace in his home and that of his wife. On one occasion, he angrily hurls a pot of plants at his wife as she tries to keep Jonathan away from him. Fearing for her safety, she reports him to the police as his behavior becomes increasingly violent and aggressive. Later, Natalie calls the police again when she learns that Gabriel is armed and intends to take Jonathan from his school. However, from Gabriel's perspective, he sees enemies abducting his child when it is actually the police who have come to protect Jonathan. He continues his search for Jonathan and encounters Charles, a homeless man who knows nothing about Jonathan. Gabriel unknowingly drops an envelope with Jonathan's name on it and becomes suspicious of Charles when he finds it near him. It is not Devon who shoots him. Gabriel does so unconsciously. At night, he decides to break into his own home. He forcefully kicks open his gates and shoots Jonathan's dog, a birthday present, without hesitation. Natalie sees the bloody body of the dead dog from her window and immediately calls the police. Meanwhile, Gabriel breaks a glass window and wakes his son from a deep sleep. He quietly leads him to escape as the sound of police sirens fills the air. Natalie sees them passing by and calls out to Jonathan. Gabriel, mistaking her for an enemy, shoots at her. Fortunately, she quickly dodges the bullet. As they flee the house, they are surprised by the spotlight of a helicopter and rush back inside. They hide under a table. Gabriel tries to radio Devon but receives no response. Jonathan is crying in terror. Gabriel tells him not to be afraid and assures him that everything will be okay. He then returns the laminated picture to Jonathan to comfort him. As he surveys his surroundings, he confusingly sees their family picture on the wall as images of the fallen soldiers from the Afghanistan war. As he stands, a police officer unexpectedly points his gun at Gabriel's head. However, Gabriel quickly fights back. He strangles the policeman to death and continues to radio Devon for backup. After a while, Natalie slowly descends the stairs to approach her husband. From Gabriel's perspective, he sees an Afghan woman he unintentionally killed before. Immediately, Gabriel approaches her and points his gun at her as he continues to ask where his wife is. Natalie fearfully answers, "I'm right here," multiple times, but Gabriel does not recognize her. After some time, Gabriel snaps back to reality. He finally sees that the woman he's been strangling is Natalie all along. He tearfully apologizes when suddenly he is shot in the back. He was shot repeatedly shortly after. Weakly, he retrieves his letters from his back pocket, addressed to his son, Jonathan, and hands them to him. The movie ends when Gabriel is incapacitated and is forcefully dragged away by his feet by a police officer. They handcuff him, and suddenly Jonathan rushes to embrace his father. They both express their love for each other through their tears. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.